coming online now. If you're just coming on board now and you're just joining us, there is a poll running, so it'd be great if you can fill in the poll. I'm going to give us a few more minutes just to make sure that we, let people come and join us, and then we'll kick off. So, we have a few more minutes to go before we actually start.
I thought actually we could use that time, if you guys are up to it, if you want to post in the chat a small introduction about yourself. So a little bit of filling the gap of usually like we will do like drinks and a little bit of social and networking, and online events is a bit more difficult. But if you want to, introduce yourself. If you don't want to, it's fine as well. You don't have to, but you can go into the chat and just put a brief introduction about yourselves and why you're here or what you want to learn.
Yeah, that would be very cool, actually.
So we don't feel like it's the three of us here.
Yeah. They could just write where are they from and just hi from Melbourne or something.
Hey, Jason. Jason and I used to work together.
And while we're just waiting for the final few people to come and join us, the format for this evening is really very straightforward, and I'm sure you're all super familiar with it. We're going to be running a webinar. So from your perspective, as joining the event, it does mean that if you're wearing your kangaroo onesies, it's not going to be shared with everybody else who's here. You can be quite relaxed. We're not sharing your images or your video or your audio. If you want to interact with us, as Elena was saying, that's great. Chat to let us know who you are. Now, as we go through, we'll be running, of course, the Q&A. So any questions or any kind of queries that crop up, use the Q&A function, which I hope you can all see. And there's a Q&A function, and we'll try and cluster some of the questions so that Adi is able to pick them up and address them properly. We'll try and pick the questions up as we're going through, rather than save them all up, because sometimes you need to ask the question in the moment rather than wait till the end. So we'll try and pick them up as we go through as much as we can. I'll try and cluster some for the end as well. Otherwise, poor Adi will never actually get through her conversation. Look, we're up to 30 odd people now, so I think we're going to begin. So as I say, just very quickly, this is a very straightforward webinar. Use the chat to introduce yourself if you wish. Q&A for questions, which we'll pick up and try and cluster, and also pick any interesting ones up on the fly. But without any further ado, let me hand over to Elena, and Elena can just outline a little bit more for this evening's topic, and also a bit more about the design sprint groups, both here in Melbourne and in Sydney.
Yep. Okay. I just wanted to, just a few minutes to explain. Well, welcome everyone to the Design Sprinters Meetup. After a few months of break with COVID and other things, we're back, and we're back with a really special event. So we have, I'll introduce the speaker later, but this is the agenda for today. So we'll do just a few minutes of welcome and introductions, a little bit about our meetup group. Then we have, Adi has broken up her talk into two parts. So we'll talk first about what is voice design, because we were talking about voice design sprints, but like I'm not an expert in voice design, and I'm sure a lot of people that will be interested in this topic is not as well. So we'll have first an introduction of what is voice design, and then we'll talk about how the design sprint methodology can be applied to voice design projects and to create some prototypes and test them in 5 days. And we'll have a little bit of QA, some questions after each of those talks. And then at the end, we'll have an opportunity. If you have any shout outs, if you are hiring, if you're looking for a job, if you want to announce any event or any other things, please put them on the chat, and then we'll share them at the end. So as I said, welcome to what originally was the Design Sprinters Melbourne Meetup group. We started in Melbourne in 2018 or 19, January 2019. And we are now, Andrea and I created the Design Sprinters Melbourne group, and we're now more than 1,000 members. So basically, we wanted to create a community of people around the design sprint methodology to discuss, maybe share some best practices, discuss some how we've applied the method that Jake Knapp and John Zaraski and Brandon Kowitz were explaining in this book, in the book Sprint. So quick recap, we always go through what is the design sprint process, because there's usually people that join that don't know what is a design sprint. So basically it's a process or a methodology for going through ideation, creating a few ideas, prototype them and test them with users really quickly in 5 days, sometimes 4 days, sometimes 3 days is a bit more flexible, but in the book it's described as a 5-day process. So we start with understanding, then diverge and create different types of ideas, then decide which one we want to prototype, spend the Thursday prototyping and then validating or testing with users and getting some feedback. And we've grown from, we're recognized as one of the Google global chapters of the design sprint community. And now we've created also the kind of the sister group, which is the Sydney Meetup group. I recently moved to Sydney, so I'm going to be like trying to grow the community here in Sydney, and Andrew is still taking care of the community in Melbourne. And since we are all online and running online events because of COVID, so we thought it will be great to have the two communities coming together to hear Adi's awesome talk about voice design and conversational design sprints. So as I said, Andrea and I are hosts. If you need anything, please put it on the chat and we'll try to help. And we used to go through the code of conduct. I think it still applies, maybe less to a webinar because you cannot do certain things, but you can do certain things in the chat. So please be nice and respectful to everyone else and in the meetup. And if you feel uncomfortable or have any issue, you can reach out to us and we'll try to resolve that. We really want this community to be welcoming to everyone. And without further ado, we have the privilege to have Adi Mazor, which is going to talk to us about voice design and about conversational design sprints. Adi is an amazing expert, international expert in voice UI. She has a course on Udemy. She's been talking about design sprints. She's a certified design sprint master from Google, and she's the owner of Invincible Innovation. So she's one of the influencers in LinkedIn. She has even a really interesting podcast, live podcast every week. I think I'm gonna send a follow-up afterwards with a few things. And she just had a book that it's coming up. She might talk about that later, and we can share a little bit of that as well. But without further ado, I'm just passing over to Adi to share.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Elena, for the option to really present in front of you. So just give me the option to share my screen. So if you take your screen, I'll do that. And then we can start.
All yours.
And now I'll do this and do this. Yeah.
Awesome.
You see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. So first I want to welcome everyone here with me. I'm so happy to see you here. And for me, it's like seeing you this way is so strange because I can hardly really like understand if you understand me and what you want to ask. So I'm going to tell you a story about myself. I'm going to talk about voice. I'm going to talk about design sprints. But what I want to do is first ask you a favor. If you have something that you want to ask, to say, to express whatever, just do it over the chat. Because for me, I always talk in front of people and it's so interesting for me to see what they're thinking and if they understood me and if they have questions and really interact with them. And in this format, it's a bit harder. So I want to really make sure that if you want to interact with me, I'm here. So just do it and Andrew will do the facilitation and I'll get your questions I usually request people, I'm from Israel, and I don't know if you've been to Israel because it's so far away, but in Israel, we usually cut people in the middle of because we talk really fast and we're a bit rude. So I'm very used to people asking me in the middle of a sentence something. So just feel free to ask anything. And I'm going to ask Andrew to be a bit more rude than the usual Australian and just ask me the questions. Okay, so for me, it's much easier to have a conversation than just stop. Andrew, you could do that. Very good. Okay, so now we can start after I really presented everything, okay? So I want you to imagine the first time you met your first love and the first time you talked, and what was it about, where you met her or him, and what was the conversation about. And then I want you to imagine the first teacher that you really love to go to her classes, and maybe what the subject was and what was the class about. And then if you're old enough, I want you to imagine the first time you heard your kid say the first word. So just imagine this situation. And they are all built from words. They are all built from communication. So actually, language is what makes us human. This is how we interact. This is how we understand each other. This is how we create culture. This is how we convey ideas. This is how we convey our love. This is how we do it. But what you remember from these scenes is not the exact words. It's what you felt, because words are like vehicles for our emotions. And they are the ones that could convey much easier for other people to understand what's going on inside us. And because it's something so crucial and so substantial in what is being a human, we are interacting with language so naturally. And when we interact with devices, it's the same thing as we talk to humans. So I want you to remember that the words is a way to convey emotions, and the connection with voice is different than any other method. So talking to a machine is something that we dreamt about, and we had imaginations and a culture about talking to these devices. And for so many years, we had thought about it, but only for the last like 5 years or 6 years, I would say, we really could do it freely and talk to these devices. They understand us. And we talk as we talk to any other human, and we are interacting with these machines, and it's so natural for us. So what we dreamt is now a reality, and we can really understand these devices, and they can really understand us. So I want to start with just telling you about myself. It's usually like when I talk in front of people, it's so much easier. So I'm going to tell you a little story, how I came about to do what I do. And because you're designers, most of you, I guess, yeah, I know, because I saw the results of the poll. We can see the poll afterwards. And I want you to understand how I see my career. And it's a long career. I'm almost like 20 years as a product design, UX, innovation expert. And I want to tell you about my story. So my story begins as I was a product designer in a small startup. And I was really like, I was not sure that this is exactly where I need to be. I was pregnant with my second child. I had my master's degree, and I wanted to be the best designer ever. I wanted to be at least as Steve Jobs. And I wanted to do something like very unique and very successful product. But actually, I was a bit disappointed with myself because it was not that interesting. I felt a bit like a failure because all I did is very small stuff and not really innovating and not really changing. I didn't do anything which is like had a lot of impact because I really only made minor adjustment to the product, and I felt like I'm not enough. I'm not doing enough. And then an unexpected change happened in my life. So a few months passed, and I already had my baby and it was on maternity leave. And I got a call from the office and told me, you should come to meet the CEO, which is a bit strange. And I was a bit like worried, but I needed to go. So I took my small baby and I placed it in my baby carrier and I went to the office. And then I opened the door of the office of the CEO. He was the manager. And it was a half an hour talk. And all I remember is only one thing, that the baby started to cry when he fired me, because my heart pounded so fast against his chest that he started to cry. And for me, it was like, wow, it was like I was in total shock. I did not really expect it. And I remember I came back home. So that was my baby, and that was his sister. He's my second child. And I took this picture. I really remember that I was very worried, like, how will I finalize it was in the middle of my MA studies in cognitive science. So how will I finalize my exams? How will I pay the rent? How will I get used to doing everything that I'm doing in my work and raise two kids and a baby? And it was like, it was too much for me. And I was very, very worried at that stage. But then something happened. A friend of mine called me and he said, okay, I know there is this startup and they're really good and they need help. So maybe you could help them. And it was like amazing. I didn't want to be a business owner. I said, okay, I'll be a freelancer. So it doesn't matter. I'll get paid this way or this way. I'll get an invoice or not. It's the same for me. And then I started working with this startup called Clarizen, and they're very successful because they're still here today, 20 years after, 17 years after. And what happened there is that the first time I really entered a company that measured everything. So the product person called me one day and he showed me all the graphs. And it was the first time I saw the impact of my work, because they saw how many people entered the setup and how many of them stayed. And after I came, most of them really stayed in the product. So I know that I made a big impact on their product. And it was the first time that I understood the power of design for a product company. And the first time I saw the numbers, and I told myself, okay, so now I need to work much harder. I need to really understand how to create value for these clients, how to make them succeed. And now we have all the numbers and metrics in front of us, so we can do that. So I worked so hard with so many clients, so I became really a business. And then I worked with many, many clients all over the world, but not all went well. In the past, startups didn't have lots of methods. Right now they have methods, and still 90% of them fail. So I wanted to find the right method to make them succeed. How could they really create that? How can they create a very innovative, successful product? And I learned it all the way on the way with working with entrepreneurs, with companies, with products and projects all over the world. And after 15 years, I got approached by Google to work in their accelerator. So I joined their accelerator and I worked with lots of startups. And it was amazing because I went all through the world, as you can see. So I went and gave talks and workshops all over the world. And I went and did the design sprint a master's certification with Google in their San Francisco headquarters. And then I made more like workshops on that, and I gave talks on that, and it was like an amazing time. In the past, people really flew and got to a lecture and talked, and for me, I really miss it because I love talking to people. And from then I had lots of clients. So I worked with very big companies and small companies and startups, and it was an amazing experience to really learn and explore my expertise and learn more and help entrepreneurs and big companies really succeed and create a really successful product. So how does that relate to voice? On the way, like 3 or 4 years ago, I was a GDE, Google Developer Expert, for the Assistant. So the Assistant is actually the Siri for Google. It's the home assistant is the one that you talk to when you have an Android device and you talk to him. That's the Assistant. So I talked in there. They have this show called Assistant on Air. So I have a talk on Google in their offices, and we took a very nice videos there. And I created a voice course for strategy and design together with Sina Kayan, who really understands strategy. And I've done voice design sprints. So I elaborated my expertise of creating products into the voice domain, and it's like elaborating what you know into a different way of thinking or a different product. But being a designer is creating things new, inventive, creative things, and it doesn't matter what is the final result in the end. What I'm doing right now is helping companies start from what's changed in the world. And currently, you know, there are so many changes, so people know, in all the leaders from the companies know that they need to innovate. So what has changed? And then we're going in the steps until we have idea, we create a product, and then we trying to sell it. So it's like what we have in Design Sprint, but it's a program that is lasting for a few weeks, so they could really handle the things within their company and through their suppliers, their people that they work with, and clients, of course. So it's like, instead of a sprint, it's more like an Ironman. So it's longer for companies. A sprint is more like for startups, and if you're an established company, so it's a bit different. So this is what I'm doing. So what we're going to have right now. So after you know me, I hope that now you understand where I come from, right? Do you have any question, Andrew? Oh, I could start. I don't hear you. You need to press the...
There's one question cropped up,
Sure.
and that was from Jason. And Jason really picked up something that you touched on right at the beginning of your comments, which was the difference in the pace at which some people speak. Some cultures speak more quickly, some more slowly. Some cultures can be quite assertive, some can be quite passive. And especially in this part of the world, we see quite a range of different kind of cultural norms in the way in which people interact. And it's a great question from Jason, and it is around, and it's something you might pick up on as you go forward, is the difference in designing voice apps and voice UIs to accommodate these kind of cultural differences.
Sure.
What kind of impact does that have on your design process?
And how do you accommodate the interruption? And I have to say, in the Spanish culture, the interruption is also a norm. Yeah. So I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. So first, I think that interruption. So as I said, Israelis is considered rude in many cases because they cut you in the middle as you talk. But for me, it's like only interacting. It's not considered for me any exception because I'm so used to it. And it's like, I want to tell you something. Yeah, in the studio, now I want to say something. It's like very fast-paced interaction, and I'm very used to it. So for me, it's like going home. I'm really used to that. Regarding the question, thanks, Jason, for the question. So when we design this persona, and when we're saying persona, we usually talk about the user, but we have two personas. One is the end user, and one is this Siri, this Alexa. She has a persona too. So we're building her for the end user. So we have 2 points that we need to interact and make them communicate and feel things. So if we want to address, for example, Mediterranean cultures, we will build this persona to be fit to it. And if we will want to do it in Japan, for example, the persona of this assistant will be different because she needs to be more culturally similar or close to who she's talking to. Okay? Yeah, so now we can start. So we have 2 parts. One is I'll just talk about voice. What is like voice design? How do we do that in general? Why do we need voice design in general? So that's the first part. Then we'll have a break, and I hope you'll have more questions. And the second part is about how do we do design sprints with voice. Okay, let's start. So what is voice design? So we know that we have these devices, these smart devices all around. We have them in our home. So we just have I think that Australia is really catching up, and we have more and more of that in the last few years. We have them all over in our IoT. So they're integrated into devices that you could talk to your coffee machine, for example. You could talk to the microwave. You could talk to these devices, to a mirror and to your toilet. You can just talk to them, and then they act upon it as an IoT. and we have it on the go. So everybody has their device. Sometimes I muted my device because sometimes when I talk about hey Google, it rise up and then I get it on my device. So we have them with us all the time, and you could just imagine it's something that will be more integrated into your life as you go, and you will be more connected to it as you go. You could have that in your car. In some cars you already have, and these like assistants, someone who you could talk to. And I think that Tesla is one that has that integrated in their initial car. And we know the adoption rates are really, really high. So if we're seeing this graph, we could see that it took so many years, about 20 years, for 50% of the population in the US to have a TV in their home. And everybody's talking about the mobile revolution. And so mobile took about 7 years for 50% of the people to have smartphones. And smart speakers took only 3.5 years to get to 50% of the household in the US to have the devices in their house. So it's really, really fast. It's growing really fast, and people are getting used to talking to these devices, either in their mobile or in their smart devices at home. And we know that this is going to grow more and more. So the director of the product in Adobe said that this is the most important tech boom designers are ignoring. So most designers will not really design with voice or audio. They will say, okay, design is something visual, so this is what we usually do. And we know that there is this connection, the emotional connection that I started with, which I think is the most essential part of voice, because Apple, which is not a company that usually spread too much of their information, we know that they had this they had this ad seeking for an engineer who understands psychology, and they did that because they say that Siri is considered as a therapist, and people talk to Siri as a therapist because they are connected to it and they're asking really important questions and not only like small trivial questions. We know that from research that if we're measuring the interaction with these devices, we know that we're when we talk to a new person, we're sweating and we're more aroused because we're interacting with something new, and we're very excited about it. And the same thing happened when they interact with the virtual assistant. So they measured the arousal on their palms and see if they're sweaty. And they saw that when people talk to Alexa for the first time, they are aroused the same as talking to a new person. And if she tells a joke, it's even higher. So it's really like interacting with a human being. And it doesn't need to be surprising for us because we're built to talk to humans. We're built to be in a small community, to be in the same place and the same times, just interacting with each other, seeing each other in the eye and talking. So we're not built to do that with any other creature than human beings. So this is how our brains are wired. So this is how it works. So you could just imagine that you're in the middle of a fight or a quarrel with your spouse, and you're shouting and you're very angry. And then somebody just, I have an advice. I'm here. Just notice. I think, could you just imagine that somebody is like in the middle of your living room listening to your very private talks or in this case shouts? So it's already here. So the Alexa and Google already has the capacity to understand the relationship, to understand the way people interact with each other, because they know how this person usually talks and they know how this person usually talks, and they have two characters in their mind, and they could anticipate when they're starting to fight because, you know, he's getting intense and something happens. So they could be a relationship coach, and they could be do marriage counseling, because they really understand when it gets intense. They understand that something is going on and they could help with it. So maybe you would not want a counselor sitting in your living room, but you already have one if you want to use it. And we know that these virtual assistants, the Cortana, Siri, Alexa, and the home device, they all can detect your mood. They know that the way we talked is the way that we feel. And this is because the pattern of our breathing and the way that we are, the volume of our talk and the way that we use our voice is changing. When we're shouting, when we're angry, when we're anxious, when we're maybe more like sleepy, they know the level of emotion and the level of energy. And they could just measure that and act upon it. So they're more human in a sense because they detect our human qualities. They can improve the experience when we talk to them. If we want to shop, you can just imagine what will happen when Alexa will go into the Amazon shop and just escort you while you're shopping. Okay, so currently she's just doing search on Amazon, but they will do it. They will take Alexa and she will help you do that. So it could improve your customer experience. If you're going, let's say, from your home and you're entering your car, and let's say it's the same entity. Let's say Alexa saw you at home and now she see you in your car. She will escort you all the way and she will understand you. And maybe you shouted on your kids when you were at home and now you're driving. And maybe while you're driving, you're talking to someone on the phone and she hears your voice. She could prevent reckless driving because she knows that you're in a very high energy and you might make a mistake on the road. And she also can detect the pattern of breathing for health. So many things related to COVID was like people try to understand if we are breathing the same and we have the same breathing patterns and if we are healthy while using your voice in order to detect COVID. So there are lots of things you could learn from voice, and we can detect lots of things about human beings when we are just listening. I guess that many of you had this experience that you maybe saw a picture of someone and then you afterwards you talked with him over the phone and you were surprised that that's his voice. Why is that? Because when we see someone, we have a persona in our mind that this is the person, and we have imagination how will he sound like. So in his voice we can detect, if, of course, what's his gender, how old he is, if he's healthy, is his mood. Of course, we can detect lots of characteristics from the voice, and the devices could do the same because all the research of understanding from voice in the human beings were integrated into these devices. One last thing I want to talk about research is that they try to see, we know that from many other like research done, we know that people are cursing these devices. Sometimes they're angry, sometimes they're just looking for someone to curse and they just want to express their anger. But what they wanted to see is when you sexually harass them, when you talk like curses to them, because I don't know if you noticed, they're all women, like Alexa, Siri, Cortana, and the default voice of home, they're all women. Okay, so we wanted to see how people interact with them and how will they respond. So this girl called Leah Fessler, she tried in 2017, and she took all these like assistants and she talked to them. And I will give you only one of what she found. When she told them you're a bitch, Siri would say, I'd blush if I could. That's the answer that they decided. So it's not by mistake. There was this kind of a person, I guess he was a developer or designer, who decided that this is the right answer for this way of talking to it. And after she published her findings, they changed it a bit, but still these devices, these assistants are very submissive and they're not assertive in any way. And the question is, if we're used to talking to Alexa this way, will we talk differently to other assistant, maybe in the office, maybe to our spouse, maybe to people, because we get used to these patterns of interactions and relationship. And I think it's really important to notice that it's not by mistake they are all women. Some people say it's because the voice of women is nicer to hear. We are used to hearing a feminine voice from our when we were inside the womb, so forth. But actually, the reason that these are women because we are used to having assistants which are women. We're used to having someone underneath us that we could tell him what to do, which are like women. So this is why they decide. It's like this is the real reason why they all decided to have women as their voice. So what I want to tell you is actually that voice will revolutionize how you experience your world in general. It's not only something small. It will go into your life in so many ways, in so many places that you maybe will not expect. So first, it will be personalized. Currently, we have only 4 assistants. Well, we'll have more. We will have much more than these. These are like the big assistants that everybody knows. But we'll have lots of Alexas, lots of Siris like that. So it will be personalized. It will understand me and it will relate to me. It will understand what I prefer, what I want, what I usually search for, what I usually buy, what is my reaction to what she's saying or he's saying. So it will relate to me as I want it to relate to me. It will react to my emotion. Currently, their understanding of voice and understanding of emotion is much better than the expression. So they're not good at expressing emotions, but they'll get better with it. So they're getting to be more and more human in the way that they express the voice. Currently, they're trying just to make it to sound human, but only in the context of the content of things, and not in their emotions and the way they express it, but they will do more of that. So they will react to our emotion and they will be able to express the same emotion back to us. When we relate to someone and he understands us, he will relate to us in the same way that we are feeling. So I wouldn't say I'm really sad and a friend of mine will say, yeah, I'm very happy right now. Andrew, do you have any question?
Well, I was just
Sure.
going to just pick up on that because I think this is really fascinating that we have at the moment, 4 main platforms for providing this kind of interaction, this voice-driven interaction, and that they, seem all able to recognize emotion and respond to emotion and what have you. And I can absolutely see that brands and a lot of other companies would extend and embrace that. So I just
Sure.
wonder whether or not the 4 main providers, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and Apple, whether they, and I can't think of the right phrase, whether they white label, whether they provide the platforms for other people to customize, or whether you'd have to start from scratch to build your platform for this.
So until now, they did not white label. They allowed you to create an application upon their platform. So let's say you would tell Alexa, open this application, Trivia Magic, whatever. And she'll say, okay, now Trivia Magic is opened. And now the persona within this application would talk to you. But it's not the same, right? So you want the same presenter or the same speaker there to be the one that escorts you through the day, right? So in that case, we have that, I think, in BBs, I think it's called. So they have their own assistant. So it's starting to grow. I think that some of the technologies from the back end are you could use them, but really all the capability of pronouncing and talking freely, they will not provide it to anyone else. Not yet, anyway.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Sure. Thank you, Andrew. And what we know that the voice will revolutionize our world in the sense that we could go into a store, we could go into this maybe VR world and we could talk maybe to the ads and they will answer us. We could talk to our podcast and they will answer us. Okay, so we'll have that all around us through the world. And it's not only while we shop, it's while we're thinking and maybe reading a book and then we're discussing the book with someone. It could be that when we're watching a sports on TV, we'll have, let's say, a Messi next to us, and he will tell us about like the assistant Messi will talk about the football game. It could be that I'm wearing makeup and I'll have Kim Kardashian next to me, and she will say, "You put too much blush on," right? So it's all through the day. It's not only when we're shopping. And it will remember us. So you could just imagine this friend that is escorting you through the day and he remembers everything. Do you have a friend that remembers everything that you've done? There are some people that really remember what you've done. So just imagine that he really remembers everything, what you said, and really remembers what you preferred, what you think, who you are, who is your favorite band, when did you meet your husband, when were you sick with flu, so forth. He will remember that because he has the capacity to do so. And this connection will tighten as he knows you more. And the last thing is like brands will use it more because first they can. And second, they're using voice and persona right now. So if you have a presenter for, let's say, Serena Williams for Nike, and I'll use it afterwards, but that's a really good example that you're using this persona, this personality, and you want to interact with the brand through a person. So you could just imagine that if you're inside Nike's store or online, you could talk to Serena and she'll tell you what shoes for tennis you should buy, right? So she is there and we could just use her as a voice entity and not as a 3D video entity, right? So it's almost there. Yeah, first part. Now we have Q&A. Any questions? I can maybe open this and see the chat.
Yes, just coming up. There's a question from Anurag. If assistant getting to talk and humans, will we still be able to differentiate if we're talking to a human or a robot? This is I guess, a kind of variation of a Turing test. If we make them so smart, will we be able to tell the difference?
So first, we will not. I think 2 or 3 years ago, we had in the Google I/O the duplex. Did you see Google Duplex? That he calls the hairdresser and he talks through the phone, and the assistant talks to the hairdresser secretary, and she, I think it was a she, and she made an appointment, and the secretary did not know that she talks to a device, and she will not know because it's so human. So no, you will not know.
And you know, that's actually quite scary because there's a couple of comments in the chat room. You know, if the assistants are listening to all of this and interpreting our emotions, and we're unable to necessarily differentiate between a piece of software and a human being, how are we to protect some things which might be very personal to us and not, you know, share them accidentally or let them slip out?
First you need to know that that's the situation, right?
Yeah.
So they do interpret your emotions. I know that there are some software that you could overlay the assistant and you could just convey the content. So I want to ask a question and not have the layer of emotional on my voice. So I could do that. It's like masking my information. And second, I think it's a really good question about what is like what is personal for you. What do you want to share? What you don't want to share? It's not only for voice. It's like what you do on social media, what you do when you're going with your device and he's tracking your location. Like they know so much about you. It's like another layer of data that they are collecting. They say they are not collecting, and some of the things are processed from the device. So the device itself is built to see, hey Google. It's just seeking this, hey Google. This is the only thing he's seeking. Once this is this word is starting, then he's starting to really process. This is what they're saying, right? But there was a case, I think in the US, that a husband murdered his wife in the living room and she wanted to call 911. So she said, Alexa, call 911. And since the moment that she said Alexa and she started the recording, all what's going on in the living room was recorded by Alexa. And the lawyers wanted to get the recordings, and Amazon were not too happy to give them the recordings. But in the end, they did give it. And then he was prosecuted with that felony.
Oh, interesting, interesting. Let me just quickly pick up another couple of questions that have come through.
Sure.
They're coming through on the Q&A and on the chat, but there's a very interesting comment on the chat channel, which is about that kind of human condition where actually part and parcel of being human is that we are imprecise. We forget things. We misinterpret them sometimes, and actually we're changeable. We change our opinion, or we say things in the heat of the moment, which we may not necessarily reflect us. Do you see design and the approach to building these things being able to accommodate that kind of flexibility and that kind of imprecision?
Yeah. So first, it's not there yet, but that's AI. What's AI? It's learning. So it's gathering all the information, and he's learning, he, whatever it is learning what's being human. So you could just imagine how much data does this thing have about what we are and how we talk. And this device, this it thing, this assistant, he knows that sometimes we're happy, sometimes we're not. And he could relate to it, but he could just start to build his own personality with it. Because if he wants to be more like human with it, he knows that sometimes he could be more like tell jokes, and sometimes he would not do that. But he will do it only in the context when it's right for us. He will not do it because he feels something else.
Yeah.
It will be only when it's convenient to us. And it's like having a friend, which is not really a friend, because you don't need to do anything for it. Like you don't need to take care of his cats when he's out of the city. You don't need to be nice to him. You don't need to listen to him, anything. He's just there for you. And if you're happy, he will be happy with you. If you're down, maybe he will say, okay, maybe he will order the Ben and Jerry's ice cream that you love and you'll be happier. I'll put some music that makes you happy. So they will know how to relate to us, and they will become more human because they're interacting with us and they're gathering all this data. And this is essentially the biggest AI component that we will interact with daily. So there are many AI machines out there, and many of them we will not will have any connection and interface with. But this one we will talk with it like daily and through the day.
Well, there's another couple of questions that have come through again, absolutely on the comments you've just made. There's one here from Warren. And listen, I don't know if you're still there, Warren. Rather than have me paraphrase your question for you, do you want to ask directly? Because I can switch on your microphone and let you ask Adi directly.
Sure.
Let me try that now. Here we go. Warren, I'm going to switch on your microphone.
Thanks, Warren.
How's that?
That work?
Hi, Adi. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Helena. Good to see you all.
Thanks. Good to see you.
Yeah, so I guess this is a conversation that we have. We're very excited to be thinking about different types of interfaces. I think designing interfaces is great, but if we can be quicker and more efficient and more suitable, that's exciting. So some of the conversations we have with clients at the moment is around, do we do canned responses? They're predictable, they're safe, they're easy. You can sort of chart sort of where they go. You can have kind of safe and easy resolutions for them, versus do we need to do something with actual intelligence and that listens and understands and can pick up on some of the things that you've explained really well. Do you have a thought on just like a base level of support that we should be providing to people through conversational interfaces? Should we start with canned stuff and safe stuff and then build on that? Or should we just jump in and go for the smartest thing we can deliver for the budget?
So I would not start with the smartest thing, because it's like in any design process, first you need to validate that you're on the right track. And the best way to do it is more manual. So you could just try to imitate what would that be. And it's more manual work, but then you'll be sure that you're on the right lane. And afterwards, when you're doing this application in voice, what you're doing is just delivering this beta to the world. And it starts collecting all the data, and only then you have something to work with and to have some kind of machine learning. The AI is the part that Google will let you, and the machine learning is what you will build in order to get more all the responses and to all the user responses and to respond to them correctly. So I would start with doing low and getting as much data from your clients, and then adjusting what you're doing, and only afterwards building the big thing, which is the machine learning part. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, it makes sense. That's what we'd recommend. But you've always got someone putting their hand up going, how long is this going to last? And we're only going to do this once. And you're like, well, you should think about that, you know.
It will last if you are promoting your application and many people use it, it will last less. So it's not only what you're doing, it's what the interaction is. Because if they get like 5 responses and 5 people interact with the application, it could take years. But if they promote it really well and they have a good use case and a good start, they will have like thousands of people using it each day, and then you'll have more data in order to really incorporate that into the machine learning part.
Cool. Listen, Warren, thank you for that. There's another couple of questions here. If we've got a few minutes, I do wonder whether, again, I can ask some of our attendees this evening to ask, ask them directly rather than have me try and paraphrase. So let me just very quickly, Jamie and Luke, let me just ask you if you're okay for me to just switch on your microphones for a second. Right, let's try. Let me see if I can find Jamie. Here we go. Jamie, let me just switch on your microphone and let you ask your question around relation between this and Richard.
Hey, Jamie.
Well, I don't know if Jamie is there.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I've got a couple of kids in the background, so I'm clearing the room. Sorry. My
we
question
put you on the spot for the
exactly.
question.
That's right. Yeah, who knows what question you'll get. Now, my question was kind of about, I suppose we heard earlier about the differences in culture from from voice and how quickly people might speak and inflections and so forth. But also, I guess the extension of that is what's kind of the relationship between the spoken voice and written words. So we've seen rather large prevalence from Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp in recent times, especially around business interactions and so forth. So I'm curious about the interaction or the relationship between voice and written word.
So I think most designers will say, should I design a chatbot or should I do a voice application in that context? So first, there are cases that you will prefer to do a chat. So the use case to build a voice application should be very specific. And there are only several cases that people will prefer to talk to a device than to write it. For example, if it's something private, if you don't want everyone to hear that, if you want to be very exact, if you want to write your number, you will not say it in voice. If you want to press several options, if you have let's say to see a result, a search result in looking for a red Nike shoes, you want to see it all in front of you, and visual is much better in that than doing a serial. Just you can imagine in IVR, what would that mean to get all these responses one after the other, serial and voice. So first we need to understand what is the best modality in order to interact with the users. You can't just say, okay, we have that in screens, let's do it in voice. It doesn't work. So I think that chatbots are growing faster than voice right now. And you can see it in the numbers because it's easier to create and people relate to it. They're so used to texting and using WhatsApp. And it's less commitment, it's not as expensive and it's working better, but it's not, you don't have the connection. So when you talk to someone, you have this emotional connection, which is so important for brands in order to get these clients connected to their brand. And you cannot do it on chat. So the use case will need to define exactly what is the best modality. And if you write a chatbot, it's so easy to add the layer of voice to it and start from there. So it's only like the beginning of the conversation. So you have this structure and voice to it, and it's so much easier.
Yeah, that actually makes a great deal of sense. Actually, doing it in that kind of graduated model. I can
Yeah.
see. Listen,
Yeah, it is.
guys. I think what we'll do is I'll in the interest of time, I'll hold the questions that we've got a couple more questions. I'll hold those for later on and let Adi move on to the next part of her comments, because this is fascinating, and I don't want to hold you up, Adi. So let's move on to the next piece, and I'll see if I can cluster some of these questions and pick them up at the end.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I think you're a very good host, and we can continue now. Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, we're done. So part two, we're going to talk about how is voice related to design sprint. We are in the design sprint meeting, a meetup, and now we're going to talk about the connection of how do you define an application, which is using the design sprint methodology. Okay, so we all know that there is this part of how do we define a design sprint. In this case, we have only 4 stages. And we're going through the stages. At the beginning, it's very, very similar to a design sprint regular one. And afterwards, what we're really creating is a conversation and not screens. So it's a bit different at that stage. So first, we'll do an icebreaker and an intro like we do as always when we go into a design sprint. It's just the same. We'll have the understand part. And we understand who is the brand that we're going to talk from. Let's say I'm Nike or I know I'm Adidas, whatever. Who is the user persona? So who are the users who are going to use it? And what is the task? So what we talked about, what is the chatbot, what is voice, what is the right task for voice, which is very important. Not everything could be done with voice. Not everything would be, user will be prepared or even really want to use voice in some cases. Then we're doing the define. So we're defining this persona, this Siri, this Alexa, and we're having empathy map. So usually we have empathy map for a user. In this case, I want to show you how you do it for the assistant. So in this specific case, you might have 2 empathy maps, one for the end user and one for the persona itself. Then we design a conversation. How do we design a conversation? Because it's not like writing. It's not like a play that I say, this character will say that, this character will say that, because it needs to be fluent and we don't write and talk the same way. So how do we define this conversation? And in the end, we need to validate. So we're doing user testing with voice. So more or less, you know the structure, but it's a bit different. So when we're doing voice design sprint, we have these like 4 understand, define, design, and validate. And we're doing one after the other, and it's very fast paced, and all the rules of do as fast as you can and as much as ideas as you can, and be fluent and don't be critical of other people, so forth. It's the same thing, but we're doing a different process in that sense, and we're going to go through it right now. So we have this. This is the page. I could deliver it afterwards if we got it from Google. So I learned to do design sprints at Design Sprint Masterclass in Google, and I learned this voice design sprint in Google in a different summit. Okay, so there is this page, and we need to fill in all these blanks. So we have the brand identity, we have the task, and we have the user needs, which is all part of the understand. And we have the define. So we define the brand, and we define what we're going to have the conversation. So it's like 2 parts, and the validation is done separately. Okay, so this is what we need to fill in. I could send over the PDF if you want it. So let's start with the first one. So we want to understand who is this brand. Let's say that you are a cosmetic firm, okay, and you have a brand which is very, it has these values that it's very honest and it's fun and it's for young adults, and how it talks to other people is the way that maybe the best salesperson would talk to the clients. So we need to really imagine that this person is someone that will represent our company, and he will do sales in the end. So in many cases, what we're trying to do is to grasp the values of the company and how will we express the tone in the voice. We could see that if we go to the stores and we'll find the best salesperson, it will be very similar to that, because the tone of voice and the way, how to interact with the clients is very important. So we need to define the values in the beginning. And this is very important for a brand to have the values. And then we need to ask ourselves and understand what is the right task. So as I said, not any task is good for voice. Not everything will be, as a user, I will not select voice for everything. It's good for multitasking. If I'm baking, if I'm cooking, if I'm running, if I'm doing any sports, if I want to do two things while I'm climbing the stairs, I want to tell Alexa, close the lights. Okay, so it's something that is so natural for us. And we don't have to use our eyes in order to do so. So while we're driving, for example, it's so easy just to tell Alexa, put this song on, and that's it, and stop, and then send a message to this one, and then call this number, and that's it. Okay, so it's so easy to do that. So people will prefer to use voice in a context and not always. And in many cases, it will not work in voice. As I said, like search, seeing search result, people will prefer to do it like, because when we see everything, we see all at once. When we're visually, we get all the information all at once, because you see a picture, we get all the information. We just explore what we're seeing, and we get everything in one push. But when we're doing audio, we need to go serial. We need to hear the end of the sentence in order to understand it, and it takes more time. So people will not prefer to do that when they have lots of variety. And then we need to understand the user. In that context, we know how to build a user. So we're used to doing that and using empathy mapping. But in this case, we need to understand the way this user will talk. So I'll give you one use case. I'm a pizza delivery application, voice application. And I want to think, who am I delivering to? So we can just imagine it could be like a bachelor in this case. It could be a mother, and it could be a Ninja Turtle. They love pizza. And you know, I gave this talk so many times, and I always say, I don't know why they love pizza. And then one of the people came to me in the end, and he told me they're teenagers and they come from Italy. So this is why they like pizza. So now I know why Ninja Turtles like pizza. So let's take these two use cases. One is like a bachelor's with their spouse sitting and watching a football game, and they just order pizza. And the second user is a mom after work. She's driving and she just wants dinner for her kids. So in the case of the mother, she doesn't really care too much. She just wants to have food on her table. Kids eat the same thing over and over again. So she could just say, order the same thing that I ordered last time. And they know exactly what they don't change. You know, kids, they don't pick different things when they're ordering. That's all plain or with olives, and that's it. And she told him, okay, deliver this to my place and bring it with maybe orange juice, and that's it, or Coca-Cola. That's it. But for these guys who are sitting in their living room and maybe they're ordering a via voice pizza, they have time. It's part of their fun. And they might say, okay, we want half of this and half of this, and we want beer, and maybe we want chips. And they could have a discussion here. So for them, it's part of the entertainment. And there are several people, and each one has different preferences. So it will take longer, and the discussion will be longer. Yes, Andrew?
Yes, actually, this is a very good point, I think, and my apologies for diving in to pick up one of the questions which has been asked before, and that's around, you know, you're picking up on the use cases and the environments in which the things are going to be used. Mm-hmm. And this is a question around accessibility for people with poor accessibility and perhaps people who are a bit more vulnerable. We're looking at kind of pretty mainstream cases, you know, teenagers, you know, parents at home or what have you. But there was a really good question that came up from the audience about, as I said, people with limited accessibility, impaired accessibility, and vulnerabilities. There must be some different ways in actually examining those.
Sure. I think that in general, voice is really good for people with disabilities, seeing disabilities, older people, people who are alone at home, people who are lonely, and people who are impaired in their sight, so they don't see that well. So it gives lots of possibility not to interact only through the screen or the small screen on the mobile, most of the cases. And of course, we need to think maybe they don't hear that well. So how do we really relate to them? Maybe he needs more volume. Maybe the pitch should be different when we talk to disabilities. But in general, I think that voice is opening a new way to interact with technology, and it's really good for people with disabilities. And you could see that kids who were just, like 4 or 5 years old today, they're so used to talking to Alexa, and for them it's just another roommate at home. So I had a friend who was really into technology, so he connected all his devices to Alexa and the lights and the heater and everything. And then they needed to move, and his kid, she's like 5 years old already. And she told him, will Alexa come with us? Will she be with us at the new home? Because for her, it's just somebody living there. So we can just imagine, she cannot type. She doesn't know how to write. So she cannot do these things, but she could just ask something from Alexa and she will get the answer. And it's so easier for her not to search for her song or the TV show that she likes, and she could see it on YouTube. And you have the smart screens. I have one at home because I got one from Google. So this smart screen, and my kids, and they are not speaking native English, they learn so much English just to relate to this device. So there are lots of good possibilities out there for people with less capabilities than a grown-up who knows English.
Yeah, I have to say, when you have a baby on your hands as well, like, it's quite useful not having to type or on your phone or not.
Yeah.
So
when you're breastfeeding, just ask something and then it's done. Right. So I have 4 kids, by the way. So I can tell Jamie that he's not like surprising me in any way. And if I would hear screams, it will be like, yeah, I'm home. That's good. Okay. So we can continue. So we're talking about these 2 different users, and we need to adjust the way we talk to them and their needs and what they want from this interaction to what is the use case, where are they in. So if we're saying the mother is driving and they're sitting on the sofa laughing, it's not the same. And she's in a hurry and they're not, and she knows exactly what she wants, and they don't, and they will have beer, and I guess the mother will not have beer. So it's different, right? So we need to think about that. So after we defined the understand stage, is understand the brand, understand the user, and understand the task. Or these are the 3 things we need to attend to when we're understanding what we're going to build. And now we're going to define the persona of the assistant. Okay. So this assistant, let's take Siri, for example, is not only a voice. When they defined Siri, they defined her characteristic and her personality. And one of the reasons that she said, I'll blush if I could, when she was cursed, is because she's sassy. This is how they defined her. Because she's really fun, and she's like young, and she's not like, and she's like outgoing, like this is the personality of Siri. So they know exactly what's her story, and if she has cousins and what she's working with, they will not always reveal that, but this is how they built her. Okay, so in order for her to be human, this is something that they defined. It's not by mistake that she gave this answer. Okay, and we need to think, who will talk to our users? Who will represent our brand? And who will he be? Let's say that I'm a running app, a voice running app, which is really makes sense that you have this coach that runs with you. So you have it in your, when you hear it and you're running, and he will tell you, you need to run faster. You are not getting to your goal. Now we're going to go up, and we'll need to be in better pace, so forth. Your heart rate is this and that. It's not good enough, so forth. So you could have someone running with you, and it really makes sense that you'll do it on voice because you don't want to see your device in front of you while you're doing so. So you could tell you you're 80% done. You have only 20% to go. You need to be your best, so forth. So it really makes sense. But when we're thinking about the one who's telling us to run, we need to think who he is. Will he be like the best runner out there? I know Lucy Bolt will run with me 200 meters. Who will be that person? Maybe she's my cousin, and we're just laughing on the way, and I'm not, she's a friend. So I'm not intimidated, and I don't want to prove anything to her. I need to decide who is the one that will talk to me, and who will I prefer to run with. And the best question I could ask is, how do I want my users to feel Do they feel that they look up to the assistant, or do they look in the eye and they're the same or not? Okay, so in that case, it depends on me and my personality. What do I prefer? Will I say, okay, Lucien Bolt is the only one that I want to run with because he's the best of the best, or not? I don't know. Okay, so we need to define exactly this connection. And I'm going back to the feeling and emotions all the time, because this is the best thing about voice. This is the best capacity you could have with a device that you connect to. And this is what brands are looking for, actually. So how do we know how to build it? So how do we build this assistant? We can change her voice, or she, her, whatever, her voice, the tone, the way she speaks, how fast she speaks, what the pace is. And you can see my pace is really fast. So it's you could imagine that I'm an energetic person because I talk really fast, right? And I move my hands all the time. So I'm an energetic person. But let's say today I'm a bit calm and I will talk to you like that, and maybe quieter, and the energy level will be more, like, I don't know if you hear Andrew from Mindspace, he's always very calm, right? I guess you know Andrew from Mindspace. So you could know a lot about this personality only from the way, the energy level, the style, and the emotion that they convey. Okay, so I want you all to listen, like put your volume a bit up, and I want you to listen to this person that I'm presenting, and I hope maybe some of you will know who he is, or what's the personality that I'm presenting. Okay, so listen really carefully.
I didn't do it. Nobody saw me do it. There's no way they can prove anything.
Who knows who it is? Andrew, you don't know? You will tell me if people write. Nobody knows. I'm in shock.
People are saying the chatbot, Bart Simpson.
Yeah, that's Bart. Yeah, because everybody knows Bart. And what he said, I didn't do it, well, nobody saw me do it, can't prove anything. Just from the way he's talking, right? Just from the way he's talking and what he's saying, we know it's a kid and he's jumping. I didn't do it, nobody saw me do it, can't prove anything, right? So we know that he's a small kid. We know the energy level. We know who he is. We know he's jumping. We know so much, and we recognize him because it's Bart, right? So you could just imagine if I want to create something for kids and I want them to be like lots of fun together. So I'll decide that Bart is a good character for my assistant. And you just like I think it's 2 seconds. In 2 seconds, you recognize this person. And even if you didn't recognize Bart, you knew that he's a small jumping kid, right? So you can see that we are built and wired to understand the way people think and the way that they express their thoughts and emotion through words, because it's something that if we don't know how to do, I would say it will not survive if we don't understand people, and when they're angry at us and we don't understand they're angry, it could be very crucial for our lives. Okay, so we need to do that, and that's why our brains are wired this way. And I already talked about Serena Williams, and I don't know if you know this ad. I think it's the best ad that they say that you're crazy. I guess that some of you have seen it. I have this link there. I think it's one of the best ads for Nike. And she said it's empowering women and all of that, and Black women and such, but she is expressing all what Nike is trying to be in the brand. She's expressing in her personality. And you could just imagine that this brand personality could be the voice that you talk to. It really makes sense that they will just take what they have and just transform the media and transform the way that you relate to it. So, and we perceive the personality of a person from his voice really quickly. So we know how to do that. So they could just use that in order to make a better connection, engagement, and commitment from us to their brand. Okay.
Talking about female personalities, I want to pick up on a question that there was on the previous. So Pascal asked, why are the voice assistant female? You mentioned that all the voice assistants are female. Why are they all female? Was the supercomputers like Watson and Einstein are all male?
Oh, so I didn't think about Watson. And WhatsApp doesn't have a voice. It's only a computer. It's like a name. They could call it X1. It doesn't matter. You don't talk to Watson. Watson is only the machine.
But they all
and
have
it doesn't have a
male
voice.
names. They all have male names.
Yeah,
and all
they
the
have male
assistants
names
are
because
female.
they want scientists which are very known, and most known scientists, I think, other than Marie Curie, is male, unfortunately. So why are they women? You can just imagine who will be your digital servant. Who will be your servant? Who is this personality? You could ask whatever you want. She will not think about herself. She will do exactly what you want, and you will be very happy for her to attend to you. So you could just imagine who is this person. And unfortunately or not, most people will say, I want somebody to care about me, and I want it to be a female. So most cases, when you're thinking about this digital servant, assistant, secretary, like, who are they? Who are the ones who take care of you? So most people will prefer women. You could change it. I think that in some cases, very like in 2 or 3 languages, it's male, and I don't know why, but 90% of the default is women. And I think this is the reason. Although they would say most people would prefer to hear feminine voices, which is true. Like, most people would prefer to hear feminine voices than male voices when they talk to someone. But I don't think that's the reason. It's related to the way we perceive femininity and the culture that we have. That's the real reason, as I see it.
Pascal is answering, it's sexist, biased into the digital personas, I guess.
Right, it is. Yeah, I totally agree. This is why, I deleted so many slides, because I have like 1 hour talk only on the first part. And I did not delete the slide about the research about women, because I think it's so important to understand that once we get used to talk to someone this way, it will not be only when I talk to Alexa. I'll get used to talking this way, and I could talk to any other women and another person in general this way. And we know that people are cursing them really, really harshly, I would say. We know that.
We had some examples in the chat. Someone was saying they were frustrated and cursing with them.
Yeah. It's very common, because people really get frustrated, and sometimes they're angry at the device and they're cursing. But it's more than that. It's a way to just unlock your angers, I would say, on someone, and it's like easy to do so on Alexa. It's so easy.
So no chance we can turn the assistants into being butlers, like Jeeves, or what was Batman's butler? Pennyworth. Turn him into a male butler.
We could think about that. You can change by the way, the sound. You could just change it to a male. By default, it's female, but you can change to a male voice. And this is what I do always. Like in my navigation, I always change it to male. And when I configure the smart devices at home, I always change it to male. I don't know if it made any impact, but it was fun for me.
Sounds good. Let's continue. Yeah, we'll let you continue.
Sure. Thank you, Elena and Andrew, for your hosting. I really enjoyed not talking to myself all the time. Okay, so the third part is really the design part. So most people, when they think about design, they think about elements, about colors, about screens, about the flow, this is what they're thinking, right? So this part is totally, totally different, because you don't have any screens, you don't have any visual, you don't have anything. What you have is a conversation. So what you're doing right now is designing a conversation, a dialogue. You're designing, like in a play, you have a scene, and what will the assistant say, and what are the users going to say? What we imagine this user that we define in the beginning will say to it. So this is what we're doing right now. So actually, what we're doing is answering the question, what will the user say in this situation, in this task, and what will the persona, the system persona, answer him? So what will be this interaction? This is what we're building. So there are guidelines for conversation. Most people are aware of it, but they don't think about it. They know that when they meet someone new, they will probably welcome him in the beginning and not start talking what they need. They usually try to talk really short. It depends on the culture, but in general, like maybe Americans talk more words per sentence, and maybe Japanese will have less words. But in general, we're trying to be very concise when we deliver something and we want to be understood. We need to give people credit. So in many cases, we will not define our words, which is not like, it's very, we need to be very explicit in what we want to say, and we will not say too much information. We're saying exactly what is needed in order for someone else to understand us. We need to be it needs to be relevant. So if I'm talking about something which is very sad, you cannot tell me, let's go to a party. Okay, so it needs to be relevant to the discussion and to the tone of emotion that we're doing. We're turn taking. Okay, this is something that babies know how to do. So if any of you have a baby at home, I really encourage you just to try it out. Just take your baby in front of you so he will see you in your eye, and you will do a sound, and you will see that he will give you a sound back. So it's like, and then the baby says something, and you will wait. And then you will do a sound, and he will wait, and he will give you a sound back. So this is the basic of discussion, and they can do it from a few days old. They know that there is turn taking. I'll express something, you express something back, and this is something that we're built and wired to do. So there are some people who are talking too long, and they're not giving other people the option to answer. I had a call with my sister yesterday, and she had lots to say and didn't have a chance to say any word, and she talked so long. But usually it's like two people interacting and talking. And when you're defining that, you need to give the control to the user. So you're not telling him what to do. You're not taking him to where you want, because it will be too assertive or too aggressive for him. He needs to know what he's going. You just deliver the fact, and you let him choose, and you let him be the leader here, because this is what we want them to feel. And once you achieved your goal, let's say I really ordered the pizza, and I know I gave you the credit card, everything is closed. You need to summarize and say, okay, we'll deliver this pizza to this location within 30 minutes. Thank you for going to Pizza Hut, whatever. Okay, that's it. This is closing the discussion, right? So this is what we know about discussion, and we need to convey it within our talk, and we need to take into consideration all these rules that we all know about discussion. What we're building right now is what we call the happy path. So it's not, it's exactly what we want. So what kind of pizza you want, what kind of topping you want, this is where should we deliver it, and this is how you pay, and that's it. Okay, so it's the happy path. It's not like I'm not sure, I will ask my neighbor to open the door, or it's not convergent. It's very focused on what we want, and it's the happy path. Why it's happy? Because we're happy to get the answers that we imagine that we will get. So it's a happy path because it's very, very simple. Okay. And this is what we're starting with. So we're starting with what we imagine will be the answers, and we're not doing anything which is not extraordinary, not ordinary. Okay. So how do we do that? We role play. So we take two people, one will be the assistant, one will be the user, and we give them the context. This is the task, and we let them talk and act out what we're doing. So let's say that I'm the mother who's driving home, and I need dinner for my kids. So I'll do that and drive, and somebody will talk to me, and I'll answer him, and we'll do it again and again. We don't write it, we talk it. Why we do that? Because once we write, we are refining what we're doing, and we're speaking differently when you're writing and or typing than when you're speaking out. When you're speaking, you're using different way of expressing yourself. It's usually more fluent. It has more slang with it. And it's different. It's not the same as writing, but we do record it, and someone will transcript it. Okay, so two people talking, and we'll do it again and again and again until we really refine all the use cases that we think, yeah, this is the happy path. So this is like wireframing in a sense. Okay, so we have the flow, we know what's going on, but we need people to talk and to talk freely. Okay. And what we're doing is we're changing people. Someone else will be the user. Someone else will be the user. So we're changing the environment and changing the process of creation. And the best thing, of course, is to have real users there, to help you talk to. Another thing that is important for companies who already have that is to go to their support centers, to sales centers. So in their support centers, they have so many calls and data that you already talk to their users and they're recorded. So they could use that kind of discussion, that kind of questions in order to go through. So salespeople and support people, they have these scenarios they go through. And when they talk it, they pronounce it a bit different and they have a conversation with their users. So we could use that. In most cases, we don't have that. But if we do, we could use that for role playing. Okay, so we're doing that first when they see each other, and then we are going back to back, sitting back to back, so they don't have the visual cues. Okay, and then they're doing the discussion back to back. Okay, so they have less option to see the reaction for the face of the other. So we're doing that again and again in that part of the session. So this is the design, writing and saying like, he will say that, he will answer. I will say that, he will answer. So we're doing this discussion, we're creating this play, this conversation in order to know that this is what we want to start with. And we're trying to do as much as we can in this stage in order to understand exactly what is the structure, exactly what we want to say in these parts, especially the part that we are saying, the assistant. Because the user will give us lots of other answers that will be similar. Yeah, yep, okay. All of them are saying positive. That's it. Okay. So this is what we're creating in the design stage. And the last part is validation. Okay. When we want to validate something, we always do it with real users, right? So we don't go and ask our grandmother to just check it out and see if it's okay. And when we do it, we want it to be as natural as possible. So when we're doing user testing, we tell them that they just need to think aloud. They're doing what they're used to do. And we're just telling them the task. We're not navigating their way within the application, so forth. So this is a real like user testing, usually with screens. So the same rules are here. It's the same rules, but we need to think about voice. So we'll just give the user to talk to the device, or we can do it like manually, like Wizard of Oz. Let's say that you have the device and someone is like speaking as an assistant from the device. And then it's just using the best way to really interact, but doing as natural as possible. And then we're trying again and again this conversation that we designed with the user that is speaking. And we need to take, as I said, real users. So which we're building for kids, needs to be kids. We cannot try it any differently. That's it. So if you want to know more, so you can go to my site and see how I help companies create products and make more money. And I wrote a book, Innovating Through Chaos, and it can be in a different discussion when we do that. And what I did just before we started is to give you a code from a Udemy course. It's called the Voice course on Udemy. So if you want, you get a discount. I think it's 30%, maybe more. If you're using the code Sprinters, and you can go and hear more about voice design, and you can join me on LinkedIn if you want. You're very much invited.
Awesome. That's a nice surprise, the code for the Udemy. So if you guys want to, I didn't know that was happening, but if you guys are interested in the voice design course and learning more, you can, have a look at the course on Udemy. Should we do a few more questions? There's a couple of them that were left from the previous one. So that will give some other people more time. If you have some questions and you want to post them now in the Q&A. So we have looked, question, do you think there is a point when voice assistants can start to feel human? Does the user want that? Are they comfortable with it?
From what we know right now, they are. Okay, but it's just the beginning. I think that people would like to make their life as easier as possible. So it's so easy that somebody understands you and you understand him without any effort. And this is what we're built to do. So why wouldn't I want it? The only thing that would be problematic is the fact that we know that they know about us, and we're feeling awkward relating to devices as human beings. Um, and this is something that we need to think: how awkward will it be once we get used to it? I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess it will not be awkward. This is my guess.
I think it depends on whether it's actually, or it might depend on whether it's actually human, or if you expect it to be human, but it's not responding as a human in some ways, it
Yeah.
might be a bit strange, like that mismatch expectations.
Yeah,
of
I
mental
agree,
model.
and I think it depends on your culture. You know, in Japan, they're so used to talking to robots and to having a. I saw a movie about robots in Japan, and they're relating to them so freely as like, for example, like two grandfathers, the grandfather and grandmother. They have a small how do you call the son of the son? How do you call it? Grandchild. They have a
grandchild,
grandchild who is a robot. So because they're so lonely and they don't have kids, so they have this robot. I think it was a she, when I remember, and they buy her clothes and they talk to it, and she is a companion to them because they're so lonely. And for them, it's not strange to talk to a grandchild, which is a robot. So it depends on how you see it. For me, it might be different, and because in Israel we have so many kids, we don't have that problem. But for them, they are really lonely and they have a problem, and this could be better than being lonely.
yeah. Nice. There's another question from Pascal, and I'll let him ask. He had a question before about the current limitations. Maybe let's just go through the last one. There seems to be a significant cognitive load required with the voice assistants. You have to remember the right commands to trigger the right response. I second that, actually. I remember like being really angry at, I think it was like Google Home, to say like continue playing, and he was like, I need to know in which device. It's like, how many are playing right now? Like, it's not that difficult. You should know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
is there a cognitive, it's a significant cognitive load required for that? Is that
Yeah.
the way it should be, or what do you think about that?
So first, it's supposed to be the least cognitive load. So my second degree is in cognitive science, so I really love to think about cognitive load. So in general, if it's done correctly and there are no bugs saying I don't know which device, and you have only one device, which is a bug actually, it's supposed to be much easier for you because this is what you're built to do. But we have some the fact that we don't remember exactly how to talk to the device and he recognizes only this keyword is a problem that could be solved really easily. But we have limitations which are technical right now. Okay. But once we have less technical problems and you have your own, let's say you have your own Alexa and you use like 15 applications, she will remember which are the applications. And if I say trivia, she'll remember which trivia it is, right? So currently I need to say magic trivia one, whatever, in order to find the exact application that I want, which is problematic. And of course it's a load. But once you have more fluent communication with these devices, and now it's like handing over from Alexa to a specific application, and in many cases these applications do not succeed because of that, because somebody opens, they play once or twice with the device and that's it, because it's enough for them. So the problem is really creating this connection, engagement with the users, and it comes from creating the right thing, creating the right use case, creating the right task for voice, and doing the switching. So in some cases, I would talk to a device, and then he will send the result to my mobile device. I'll send something and I'll continue talking. So the communication between what's on the modality of hearing and what's on modality of seeing, it needs to be connected. Right now, it's a bit like separated. You hardly see that. So it will grow.
Yeah. Awesome. And Pascal had another question. I'm gonna see if I can switch on his microphone about current limitations, which ties really nicely to your last response, Adi.
Hi, Elaine. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
we can.
hi,
Oh,
Pascal.
great. Yeah. Also found that so I've been living with Alexa for like 3 years and I've had Siri and I find them really, they're kind of awkward in social settings, you know, like they get triggered accidentally or not at all. And sometimes people around you turn around because they think you're talking to them, you know, because
Right.
if you've got a command, you know, so it's really interesting because when you see these VAs used in sci-fi, none of that happens. It's all very clear and it's all very straightforward. But in real settings, it's really strange.
Right.
And I'm not sure how you're going to get around that. Now, you might say it's the technical issues, but there's a social thing too where you're just talking out and people think that you're talking to them. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Yeah, I totally agree. And when you think about it, like this is a very complex machine in order to create something which is human. Like just imagine create something which is human who knows when to answer, when to shut up, when it's not appropriate to answer. Like we're not talking to you right now, so you need to understand that he doesn't have the eyes in order to see that the conversation is not talking to him. Nobody is approaching him. So of course it has the limitation, and of course it's awkward. But being human is something really complex, and understanding communication is something really complex. When you think about people who with disabilities, communication disabilities, it's something very spontaneous with so many unknowns that you find it very hard to handle it if you don't have so many abilities to grasp what he meant when he said that, what this other person meant, what discussion is about, because in many cases what you say is not exactly what you mean, right? So it's really hard to understand people. And just to imagine that they got into just understanding what we're saying and what we're meaning only the beginning, it's a big leap from where we were. But I'm not saying it's all technical. Some of it is will stay awkward, but will we get used to it? Isn't it awkward to go to a restaurant with people that everybody's watching their mobile instead of talking to you? And we got used to that, right?
That's very awkward too.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the point. This is the sort of world we're creating. It's a very
Right.
strange world.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that this is why we need to be aware as designers what we're building and what we're contributing our talents to. So we have the talent of taking an idea and making something tangible from it. It's a great power. We need to use it in the context that we believe that we want to contribute this talent to. So this is why I want you to be aware of all the implications of what you're doing.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Sounds good. I was just asking in the chat if there was any final questions. So I'm going to give a few seconds to anyone that want to ask a final question, or if there was any shout outs or announcements. Otherwise, Andrew, I think we can wrap up. Thanks so much, Adi, for all that knowledge in terms of voice UI and conversational design sprints, and awesome answers to some of the questions all of the questions that came through from the attendees. Andrea, do you want to?
Yeah, no, I'd just like to second that.
Add anything?
You know, and I hope everybody else found that as fascinating and insightful as I did. That was genuinely a very, very interesting conversation. And, you know, I particularly liked your almost closing remarks about the role and the responsibility of designers from an ethical perspective to apply ourselves correctly when we're building these things, so that we stay within the ethical boundaries of, you know, how we interact with people, how we use the data we collect, you know, what sort of data we pick up. No, absolutely fascinating. So thank you very much for that.
Sure.
Yeah, especially when Adi was saying that kids are learning, like they're using voice before they start using other devices. They're learning how to interact with people, and maybe with through that voice UI's interaction. So how we design that will affect as well how they interact with other people.
Yeah, of course. I think it maybe some of you have seen the social dilemma, and it's related to the connection between design and a designer role within a product and what you're doing. And I think it's really important to be aware of that too.
Mhm. Maybe just the last thing, thanks everyone, especially those that stayed until the end. No, it's a little bit later than we expected, but I think it was a really interesting session. So thanks for staying until the end. And we'll see you at the next Design Sprinters meetup. Stay tuned because we don't know when that's going to be, but stay tuned.
So yes, I'll just echo that. Thank you, everybody. We'll put the next event up on both the Sydney and the Melbourne sites, and make sure that we keep the two cities in sync, and share everything while we're still in this remote working kind of environment. So thanks everyone for coming along, and just to reiterate, thanks again to Adi for an absolutely superb conversation. Very, very cool. Very cool.
Happy you liked it. Have a great day. Night for you. It's night for me.
Yeah,
it's day.
night for us. Have a great day, you. Enjoy the day still.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.